we'll be building a really robust application that's architected extremely nicely and is written extremely cleanly. If you guys want to... What is up, my disciples? If you're new to this channel, my name's Coding Jesus. If you're old to this channel, my name is still Coding Jesus. In today's video, we're going to be looking at building a trading platform from scratch. Now, what does that involve, Coding Jesus? But what that involves will really change over the course of time. But to give you a general idea what that currently involves and what I envision that looking like is a client and a server. The server acts as a matching engine that takes in orders and responds with fills if there is indeed a fill. And if there is no fill, it might respond with an acknowledgement. Now, at the very beginning, guys, we're going to make this simple. We're going to start with a command line application for the trading client and a general server to handle all these requests. Slowly but surely, as we progress in this series, that command line trading console is going to turn into some sort of WPF application or some sort of WinForms application that we will have maybe an order ladder that we can see the trades coming in. We can see kind of what's currently on the order book. We can also submit orders that we'd like to, maybe cancel orders that are currently on the order book that are ours. And so that's what it's kind of going to look like over the course of time. Now, I'm not looking to build a production tier application that's going to be able to handle 1 million concurrent connections. Okay, I'm one person. Exchanges have teams of hundreds of software engineers working on that. That's not really the point here. The point here, or the end goal, is to build an application, or to build a trading platform rather, where you can have 2 to 3 connections, maybe more, maybe 10, who knows. But you can have around 2 to 3 connections and you can trade alongside your friends in this little environment that you're going to be building yourself. All right, that's really the goal that we're working towards. Now, a lot of people ask me, why C#? They ask me questions like, what am I going to get out of this? And let's first answer that before we actually jump into the code. Because this first episode is going to be kind of setting the expectations so you guys understand what we're jumping into before we actually write a lot of the code itself. And in fact, in today's video, there won't be many design decisions we're going to be going over. It's primarily going to be understanding what we're getting ourselves into and then writing some code, writing the frame of the actual trading engine. All right, guys. The first thing I get is why C#. And there is really 2 ways to answer this. Why I like C# and why I don't want to use another language like C++ or Python. Now, at work, I write C++ 50% of the time. The thing is, C++ has a very high learning curve, and that's going to turn off a lot of people that just want to learn how to write this. C# is a strongly typed language. It is a general purpose programming language. It has a low barrier to entry, and so I decided to use it not only because I'm comfortable with it, but because I think it will attract as many people as possible to this actual series. All right. Now, why not Python? People ask me, why not Python? Well, I see Python all over the internet, and personally, I'm not a fan of Python. The reason being is because I like a strongly typed language. Now, I do write Python sometimes at work. I might read somebody's code that they've written in Python, so I am familiar with Python. But I'm not as familiar with Python as I am with a language like C# or C++. Okay, I have my qualms with Python. I think Python's great if you want to iterate over things quickly. But in terms of robustness, I'm much more comfortable with C#. That doesn't mean that Python is not a robust programming language. It is indeed, but I'm just more comfortable with C#. All right, guys, another thing I want to address before we jump into the code, guys, is what are you going to get out of this series? Well, you will learn how to write a order book class, for example, and have a matching algorithm that works based off FIFO. You will understand kind of the nitty-gritty implications in terms of order submission, what a client should expect to get back, how market data is disseminated, which forms of market data are disseminated, how fills are sent back to users, what is contained in a fill. Now, we won't be copying, for example, the CME spec entirely. Of course, I'm one person. I can't build by myself a trading engine that supports 100,000 or 1 million concurrent connections. Okay, that's not practical. But the goal that we're really heading at here, guys, is to have one server and to have multiple clients that are all going to be connecting to the server, submitting orders, and the actual trader will be consuming that market data and acting on that market data to either maybe cancel an order, submit a new order, etc., etc. Now, in terms of who can be actually, or who is the audience for this? Well, obviously you're watching this if you're a coder. But even if you're not a coder, I think you're going to enjoy my commentary in terms of the nitty-gritty inner workings of an exchange and, that sort of discussion or conversation, because this isn't scripted. I mean, I have notes down, but I'm really talking to you guys as though this is a live stream. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that. Now, currently it's 1 a.m. So it's actually 12 a.m. CST, 1 a.m. EST, and most of my viewers are actually in the EST time zone. So it's most likely 1 a.m. where you are right now. And I'm doing this at 12 a.m. where I am right now because I work during the day and I really want to make this series, so I'm doing it late. So if you like it, make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to show that you appreciate this. Alrighty, the last thing I want to talk about, guys, before we get into the code, or the second last thing rather, is the costs and trade-offs. Like I said, I am one developer. Okay, I'm one developer and I'm doing this at 12 a.m. So the trading engine that I build will not be as robust as a trading engine being built by 30 developers in the CME or at ICE or the New York Stock Exchange. Now, of course, if you're a software engineer, you understand this, you take this as a given. But if you're not a software engineer, I don't want you to come into this thinking rather that I'm going to be building some massive production-based trading engine, because as one person, that is nearly impossible. It'll take up so much time that I won't be producing any other videos or any other content. So this is going to be a trading engine that, while robust, is not going to be production tier to the point where it could support a million different people trading. Now, at the same time, I'm going to be making cost-benefit decisions when it comes to little things in terms of which type of, for example, API I want to use in gRPC. Do I want to use a unary API where I submit an order and I expect some sort of response back, or do I want to use a streaming-based API, right? Those little decisions are things that I'm going to be talking about throughout this series, and things that are going to be relevant for you as a developer watching this, or potentially as a layman person just interested in trading. Now, guys, another thing that's important to mention is I don't have all the answers. So if you see me writing a piece of code that you might have a question about or comment, or maybe you think it could be done better, all this code is going to be online, so you can either contribute or you can ask a question or make a comment in the comment section below. And hey, maybe if I think that what you said is, you know, really way better than, for example, what I did, then maybe in another video or a follow-up video, I will go ahead and implement what you have suggested in replacing what I have written. All right, I'm not the type of developer that has a massive ego. If somebody did something that's much better than what I did or has a way better direction, I will go ahead and adopt that direction, because I owe that to my viewers, right? I owe that to my viewers to produce the best sort of trading engine series out there. All right, guys, and the last thing is in terms of the layout. Before we jump into the code, I swear we're about to jump into the code. Before we get into the code, guys, I'm always a week ahead of you guys. So you're going to be watching this video, and I've already written the code for this video, right? So what I'm going to be doing is, on the right side of my screen, I have two monitors. On the right monitor, I will have my completed version for this episode. And on the left-hand side, I will have a completely blank, in this case, it's going to be a blank solution file in C#. So I will be starting from where I previously began a week prior. Okay, so if you guys are watching this at the second week, the second video rather of this trading engine series, I will already be on the writing code for the actual third video, right? So I'll be walking you through what I've previously already built. Okay, I think that's the best way to go about doing so. It's the cleanest and quickest way, and it allows me to think of the design decisions beforehand so I can explain them to you as easily as possible. Alrighty, guys, let's now jump into the code. Let's get into it. Alrighty here, so let's see. I want to share my screen with you guys. So I am now sharing my screen. And you probably can't see me. And now you can see me. And I'm just going to check if you can hear me as well. So, like I said, guys, we're kind of building this plane as we're flying it. So hopefully you can see me and my screen. Alrighty, I'm pretty confident you can. Let me move this and adjust my screen real quick. And I will put timestamps down below, guys, in case you just want to skip over some of these things. Okay, so what I have in front of me is creating a new project, a new C# project. Now, Visual Studio comes with C++, Python, and C#. And so this video is not going to assume that I need to walk you through how to download Visual Studio, okay? I will include a tutorial in the description box below, and it's actually quite simple. So as you can see here, when I open Visual Studio, the first thing that it asks me is, what do you want to do? I have a list of previous projects that I've worked on, and I also have the option to create a new project. So that's what we're going to click on to start here, guys. I click on it and ask me, what do I want to build? Well, I want to build a C# console application, and that's actually the first thing up here, C# console application. So I'm going to click on this. Now, our C# console application, we're going to write it in Windows, but we're going to be using .NET Standard 2.1, and the server is going to be written in .NET Core 3.1. Now, if you don't know what that means, it simply means it's portable to Linux. All right, so let's select this. Now, let's actually now go ahead and give our application a name. So we will call it Trading Engine. This is going to be the Trading Engine server, so we will be writing a separate project for the client. This is simply the server. Now I'm going to go ahead and browse to where I want to save this. So I will save this solution under this folder, Trading Engine, Source, Trading Engine. I'm going to select that folder. Awesome. So I'm going to call this Trading Engine server. Next. Okay, we're going to be selecting C#.NET Core 3.1, long-term support, create. Alrighty guys, we are now creating this project. Ba-bam. As you can see here, we have our project in front of us, and this is the beginning of your journey. This is your hello world journey. Alright guys, before we begin, we're going to start off by just setting some ground rules here. So we're going to set our root namespace, our assembly namespace, as well as our C# language version. So we're going to go ahead here. Alrighty, and we're going to do the following. So I double-clicked on this little csproj file over here, and I'm going to set some parameters for us. So I want the language version that we're going to be using, C#9. C#9 is the latest language version of C#, and it's a language version that I like using because I like using the latest and greatest. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to set our root namespace to TradingEngine.core. Now you're asking yourself, Coding Jesus, what the hell did you just do? I don't know what that means, and that's okay. I'm going to tell you what this means. As you can see when we go to program, we have namespace Trading Engine server. I don't want it to be called Trading Engine server. I want it to be called, let's call it actually Trading Server Engine server.core. So that's going to be our root namespace. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, if you're familiar with Java, I believe everything in Java needs to be in a class. You can't just have a free function just standing in the middle of nowhere. But because of C#9, we have the ability, I believe it's called something entry. Single line entry, something along those lines. I don't exactly remember what it's called. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this whole class program thing. I think it's really annoying. We're just going to have this. We're just going to use this namespace because this namespace will be everywhere. Now currently, we don't actually have a file that defines anything in this namespace, so we're going to see an error, but don't worry about that. Alrighty guys, well what are we going to be using for this trading engine? Well, this is going to be a server-side application, and we're going to be using a lot of tools that Microsoft provides us in terms of both dependency injection, hosting, and logging. Now, a lot of you are probably asking, what are we going to be using for logging, Coding Jesus? Well, we will be using Microsoft's own logging library here, its own iLogger library. I'm not looking to write my whole logging class here for you guys. We want to get into the actual code. We want to get into the actual body of this. So let's go ahead and add the using directives I need to access both dependency injection and hosting. Now, if you don't know what dependency injection is, we'll get there in a second. Okay, so let's just first add those two. So using Microsoft, we want to use extensions, dependency injection, okay? And we'll add those NuGet packages to our C# project in a second. Extensions.hosting. Now you're probably asking, what's a NuGet package, Coding Jesus? I'm new to C#. Well, if you're familiar with Python, that's like the, what do they call it, the cheese store, the store where you can actually go ahead and, pip install whatever that you need so that you can import those libraries into your project. Alrighty guys, let's see here. It doesn't understand what extensions is, okay? And we'll get to actually importing those in a second. The first thing I want to define, guys, is a file. Okay, we're going to define a file that is going to be our app settings file. This is where the configuration for our server is going to live. So let's right-click here on Trading Engine Server. Let's go to Add. Let's go to New Item. We want to add a JSON app config file. So let's go ahead and do a JSON configuration file. Let's just call it app settings. Now, I don't want to have any of these things in here. We're going to define our own things in a second. But guys, you're going to have a very, very bad time if you don't click on app settings here. Sorry, if you don't right click on it, go to properties, and in this pane that opens for you down here, always copy this to the output directory. All right, always copy it. What this is going to do is it's going to copy it to the location where the binary of this the binary is going to live, which is the output of this compiled program, such that when the application is executing, it can access this appsettings.json file. We're going to see that in just a second. Okie dokes, guys. So before we even get to the actual trading engine body or using any of these dependency injection libraries, etc., let's go ahead and create our interface to our trading engine. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm using Control-Alt-C. It's a hotkey that I have. What you can do is you can right-click here, go to Add Class, and we're going to go ahead and add, where is it? Loading. We're going to add an interface, and we're going to call it iTradingEngine Server. Okay, our interface for our trading engine server. As you can see here, now we have our tradingengine.core. I believe I called it tradingserver.core, so that's what it should be called. Let's go ahead and add assembly name. Let's add that as well. Let's call it tradingengine-server.core. Alrighty, let's just make sure these line up. And let's go back here. So, server.core. Alright, this is our interface. This is what we are going to be programming our trading engine server against, right? So let's go ahead and now add a class called Trading Engine. So we are going to go ahead and add a class called Trading Engine Server. Now, Trading Engine Server is in this namespace, and it's going to inherit from iTradingEngine Server. Now, as you can see here, my interface is not public. It's default internal. Now, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty about that, but pretty much what I'm saying when I'm saying that this is not public is I'm saying I don't expect to use it in some other libraries. And indeed, this is not a library, it's an application. We were going to be adding libraries in just a second, or not in a second, in another video, but this is currently internal. So this is what we have so far. Now, the next thing that I want to do, guys, is now I want to start making sure that Trading Engine Server is indeed a server, so it is a background service. Now, how do I go about doing this? Well, how I go about doing this, guys, is I need to now start using some of Microsoft's hosting. All right, so I'm going to make this a background service, and you're probably asking, Coding Jesus, where the hell are you getting background service from? Background service. Well, background service is in Microsoft's hosting NuGet package here, right? So I'm going to find and install. Do I want the latest version? I believe I want 5.0. So where the heck is this? Is it 5.0, or maybe I'm thinking of the wrong thing? So let's go ahead and look for hosting here. Browse hosting. Yep, and the latest is indeed 5.0. So let's go ahead and install that. All right, that is currently being installed. So I need to click OK. And yes, I know that I'm missing background service. I need to add the namespace. So what I do here is Control and dot. That will allow me to place this using directive right here at the top. And I'm not using any of these, so let's get rid of it. Okay, now this is going to put a constraint on our Trading Engine server. Because it inherits from background service, it needs to override background service is key method. And that is, I believe, execute async. Yes, execute async. So execute async needs to do something. Now, anytime you have a service or you have some sort of game engine, you're going to always see this concept of a loop, like a game loop, right? Even a server has a server loop. Now, my server may not need a loop, but I'm going to include it regardless, right? Just for completion's sake. So while our server is not canceled, so why a cancellation request is not requested, we are going to do something with this actual trading engine. Alrighty. The next thing, guys, that I want to have in this actual trading engine is I want to have a logger. So I want to be able to log when I do something X, Y, or Z. Okay, now where am I going to get this logger from? Well, I'm going to dependency inject this logger into my trading server. Now, what this logger is going to look like is it's going to be part of Microsoft's logging utilities, or logging library, or whatever you want to call it. It's going to be iLogger. All right, and where do I get iLogger? Well, I got it from the exact same location, or the exact same NuGet package rather, that I downloaded when I installed this hosting, this background service class, when I installed this hosting package. So that's available, and this is a template type, so it's going to take in a given class. So the class that I want to log is called Trading Engine Server. I'm going to call it logger, and in this constructor, I am simply going to have a private read-only class iLogger. That's going to be of type Trading Engine Server. I'm going to call it logger. All right. When I get this logger, what am I going to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to make sure that it is not null. And if it is null, I'm going to throw a new argument null exception. Where the hell is this hiding? Where's my IntelliSense for this? Well, my IntelliSense for this is not here because I don't have system import. I'm not using system. So there we go, using system. Alrighty, so I'm going to throw if logger is null. All right, that's going to be a nice sanity check for me. Now, what I also want to do is I want to dependency inject the settings that I'm going to define for this TradingEngine server. As you can see here, guys, this is where I'm going to be including my actual TradingEngine server configuration, and I want to dependency inject that into this TradingEngine server. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that I don't want to have to write code to read from this file, to format it the way I want to do it. I just want Microsoft to take care of that for me, their library to take care of that for me, rather. So I'm going to include iOptions, and we'll get into what that is in a second. And this is going to be of type TradingEngine server configuration. So I'm going to make another class here, TradingEngine server configuration. TradingEngine server. And I'm actually going to have it in a separate folder. So I'm going to have a configuration folder. So I'm going to go here, add new folder, TradingEngine server configuration. Alrighty. So I'm going to go in here and add a new item. I'm going to go ahead and add a new class. So new class. I will go ahead and add TradingEngine server configuration. Alrighty, now you can see something that's actually interesting. So I have a folder in here because I liked, or added a folder in here because I like to be able to have a distinct understanding of what lives where. So I have my data objects in some sort of data folder. I have my configuration objects in some sort of configuration folder. As you can see here, what this did was it added a namespace. It changed the namespace from .core, and it appended this .core .TradingEngine server configuration. All right. What I'm actually going to do here is I don't like that this is so long, so I'm just going to have it as .configuration. Alrighty, so what's going to be in this trading server configuration? Well, heck, I don't know yet. We're not there yet. But what I do want is I want this available to me in my TradingEngine server because I want this dependency injected into my actual TradingEngine server. So iOptions was, or Microsoft Extension Options was installed when I installed the hosting NuGet package, just like the logging, or the logger, or the iLogger class rather, is made available to me when I installed that NuGet package. So I will go ahead and now take advantage of this iOptions by using the namespace. Now, what is iOptions doing? Well, iOptions is saying that we have this item, and it may be null, it may not be null. So we might have actually properly configured this configuration object, or maybe we haven't, and that's still okay. All right, so it's not going to give us any sort of problems here. It's just an option to have this or not have this. Now, I'm going to be using this configuration namespace because I need this configuration object here. So I'm going to call it config. Very simple, and I don't want this to run off the screen, so I'm going to have it like this. Now, I also want to store this config here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I actually want this configuration. So I want this TradingEngine server configuration object, and I'm going to call this config, or TradingEngine server config, rather. Okay. Now, I have this iOptions object here. How do I get the actual configuration out of it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something like TradingEngine configuration service. So if config.value, which will actually return the value of this option, is null, then I want to throw. But if it's not null, then I want to actually take what it is. So argument null exception, name of config. I believe this is called the null coalescing operator. There's like 100 null operators. I believe that's what it's called. I will put a correction if it's not in this actual video. So I don't know the actual name, null coalescing, blah, 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 null indexing, okay. But what this is pretty much doing, which is what's important out of this point here, is that it's saying that I want this value if it's not null. But if it is null, then I want to do what's on the right-hand side of this operator, which is I want to throw an exception, because I don't want to have any null settings. I want to use this settings object, and I want to be confident in using the settings object throughout the course of this actual presentation here. Alrighty, guys. Alrighty. Now, we're already running into a problem, but it's a problem we have a solution for. See, background service is a protected abstract, has a protected abstract method called execute async, which we need to override in order to actually use this server. Now this is protected, meaning I can't just call TradingEngine server dot whatever on the class we instantiate of TradingEngine server. I need to make this available in a public method on TradingEngine server. This is where we have our first method that we are going to be adding to our interface. We're going to be adding a method called run. It's going to take in a cancellation token, and we're going to have it as a default value. We don't need to put default here. We're going to actually include it in our implementation. Now, am I going to be explaining in this series what a task is? No. All right, so I'm not going to be explaining what a task is because that's a whole 15-minute video. Alrighty, so I have this TradingEngine server, and I'm going to now actually implement this method run. And all I'm going to really do here is I'm going to forward task run. I'm going to forward the cancellation token to execute async. Right, this is how I'm getting that execute async to become public for me to actually call later down the road. Alrighty. That is perfectly fine. Task represents a long-running operation. Now, why is this giving me this problem? Oh, well, because we're not actually returning a task. Now, we're going to return a completed task here, so task.completed task at the end, because we need to return some sort of value. Alrighty, guys. Now, as you're going to see, this doesn't actually need to take place. I don't need a public run method. I'm adding it for completion, but the actual Microsoft library for hosting this server as a background service will call execute async for us. Okay, so we don't actually need to have this method here. I want to have it for completion in case, you know, maybe down the road we want to do something by actually calling run explicitly as opposed to having the Microsoft hosting library call execute async for us. And it is able to do so even though this method is protected. Alrighty, guys. Okay. The next thing we actually want to do is now focus on being able to run this TradingEngine server by hosting it, by having it run asynchronously for us. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to first build a host builder. So we are going to build a host that will host this application for us and run this application as a background service. So let's go ahead and create a class called host builder, or TradingEngine server host builder. TradingEngine server host builder. Alrighty, and this is going to be a public sealed class, meaning nobody can override the contents of the methods in this class. And we're also going to make our TradingEngine server here sealed as well, because we don't want anybody overriding this execute async method. Alrighty, let's go to this host builder. Alright, so what are we going to have here? Well, we need a static method that returns a host for us. And this host builder is going to add this TradingEngine server as its hosted service so that it can call this background service is execute async operation. Alright, so we're going to have public static iHost. And this iHost lives in a namespace that we want to use because we don't want to fully qualify it. What we can do if we wanted to is do something like this, but that looks ugly. So instead, I'm going to defer to a using directive here. All right, so it's going to be called build TradingEngine server. Alrighty, what I am going to do here is I am going to say, you know, I want to call host.createDefaultBuilder. What I can do is I can forward any command line arguments to this. I don't need to, so I'm not going to do that. .configure services. So this is where things get real interesting. So whenever we configure a service, guys, and I'm not a super pro at the inner workings of this library, but whenever we configure a service, what we do have here is we are going to be taking in both a context in which this service will be built, which will include various configuration objects. So we will be able to call our actual app settings configuration objects, or set them rather, in our service here. And we're also going to have access to various services that we'd like to add. For example, we want to add a singleton service, or we'd like to add options, or we'd like to add a hosted service. So that's going to take the form of our context and our services. And this is a Lambda expression, guys, okay? So this is what this is doing. So this is a lambda. So we're going to be taking in a context and a service, a collection of services, and we are going to want to do something to them in order to configure our host and add our trading engine server as our hosted service. So hopefully that doesn't sound too confusing. You'll get to see how that looks like in a second. So we want to return an instance of iHost, so we need to call build here at the very end. But now let's look at the actual contents of this configure services call. The first thing we want to do, guys, is we want to start with allowing ourselves to inject the dependencies that we need to from the actual app settings file. And how are we going to do that? Well, we are going to rely on this context object, because this context object is going to allow us to index into our configuration, which is a representation of this app settings.json file. So let's take a look at that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with configuration. And we want to be able to add the ability to have options in our services, right? So what do I mean by options? Well, let's go back to Trading Engine Server. As you can see here, we want to be able to have an optional configuration object in here. And we need to enable options in this actual configuration services method, or in these actual hosts. So what we're going to do is in our services, we're going to go ahead and do add options. And I believe this is an extension method on services. So yes, I need to add this using declaration up here. Add these options. And now what I want to do is I want to add a potential class to our configuration, okay? And that class is going to be this Trading Engine Server configuration. But this class is empty, right? We're going to flush it out soon, but we want it available to us in our actual host object, in our actual background service. So in order to do so, we need to go ahead and configure our services to recognize that this Trading Engine Server configuration object actually exists. So we will call configure. What we're going to do with this is we're going to index into the context. And what we're going to do is index now to the configuration. And we are going to get a section of the configuration. What is this configuration object here? Well, this configuration, you can think of it as a representation of this app settings.json file, which is empty. And we want to get a section of this file. So we're going to call get section. This section is going to be the section called, we're going to call it literally Trading Engine Server configuration. And that is in our namespace .core.configuration, right? We want to map the values in this app settings.json file into our trading server configuration object. Now, there's nothing in here yet, but that's the next thing we're actually going to take a look at. All right, so do I need an extra bracket here? No, I don't. So why is this giving me this problem here? Oh, yes, because it needs to actually take in a type we want to configure. We want to configure this exact same type. So that is what we are going to have here. Alrighty, guys. So it's going a little bit off the page, but I think we can live with it here. Now let's actually take a look at what I meant by configuring this iOptions parameter, so this Trading Engine Server configuration. Well, guys, I don't want to need to write all this code to read from this file and then set the fields, etc. .configure on services will do all of that for me. So let's say, for example, that I want to add a section to this configuration. And like I said, guys, this section is going to be called, what's it going to be called? Well, it's going to be called name of Trading Engine Server configuration. So we're going to call it Trading Engine Server configuration. So this is going to be called Trading Engine Server configuration. Now, what do I want in this configuration, right? We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty just yet, but I want to show you guys an example of how this works. What I want in here is I'm eventually going to have a server that's going to be accepting requests from clients. So I'm going to want to have a Trading Engine Server object, right? So part of this configuration is I'm going to have a Trading Engine Server settings. And one of those settings is going to be a port. So I'm going to have here port, and let's just say for the sake of this example, it's going to be port 12,000. All right. So now I've kind of mapped out or laid out how my actual Trading Engine Server configuration should look like. So how should it look like? Well, it should have an object inside of it called Trading Engine Server settings. right? That's what I had here, trading engine server settings. And that inside of it is going to have a port. So this is going to have a public integer called port, and it's going to have a getter and a setter. And this is going to be, as I mentioned, part of the actual trading engine configuration. So we're going to have, let's call this, and we're going to have a getter and a setter. We're going to take a look at how these get filled for us without doing any code or writing any code on our end above and beyond the 2 lines of code that we wrote in this host builder. Okay. The next thing, guys, I want to add is I want to add our singleton objects to this actual host. So I want to register singleton objects in this dependency injection, a little lambda that we have here. So we're just going to say add our singleton objects. So any association, so one second, services, add singleton. So any association with our trading engine server should be associated with a concrete instance of trading engine server. Of course, there might be other implementations of trading engine server, but if I were to add one, for example, and then add another services.add singleton here, trading engine server, and for example, I have, Coding Jesus trading engine server. Let's just say this existed. Right? Then what this call would do straight after the call before it, so line 23 would override the object, the singleton object associated with this interface, right? So it would pretty much make this line totally useless. There's not going to be multiple implementations of a trading engine server, at least I don't foresee there being in this series, so I'm not going to need to worry about that. Now I'm going to actually add the hosted service. So I'm going to register the hosted service in this dependency injection container here. So add hosted service. It's going to be called, so what we're going to do is call services.add hosted service, and it's going to be the type that we want to host. So this is going to be the type that Microsoft's hosting library that we have imported here is going to rely on being or inheriting from background service. So this is going to be trading engine server. And guys, I'm hoping as I'm talking through this video and as I'm going through this series and as I'm developing on YouTube, I'll be much more fluent in the way I explain things. I'm hoping that I'm explaining this properly and that you guys aren't too confused just yet or aren't confused at all, which is the ideal. But if I am confusing, because I might not have explained something properly, make sure to leave that in the description of this video below, guys. Or not the description, in the comment section. I've been talking for way too long, I'm tripping over my words. Alright guys, so we have built our entire trading engine, or the instantiation of this trading engine rather, in this one method here. This will be our background service that's going to run indefinitely as a trading engine. Alright, so how is that going to look like? Oh, I just remembered what this is in C#. So what this feature where I don't have to have class, program, blah, 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 public, static. This is called, I believe, a top-level statement in C#. You can only have one top-level statement. So I can't have another .cs file that doesn't have any classes in it. Okay, this is my entry point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do trading engine host builder. And I'm going to call build trading engine server. Now I'm going to say using var host, or engine rather, equals this. So this is going to build my entire dependency injection container and hosted service for me in one line. Okay, so it's very clean, very easy to understand what's going on here. Now I'm using here because I want to dispose of this engine when the program terminates. If you're not sure what a using statement is in the context of an disposable object, I will leave a link in the description box below. You can take a look at that. It's actually quite important. It gets rid of managed resources that you need to get rid of so that there is no leak in resources, rather. The next thing I want to do, guys, is I want to make sure that these services that I am adding over here to the iService collection is available to me throughout the entire application. Now, I don't know currently if I'm going to need the objects that I will add to this service collection later on down the road in some sort of globally accessible class. But I'm just going to add that currently in case I do need that later down the road, if I need these services somewhere later down the road. So I'm going to add another class here called Trading Engine Server Service Provider. Add class Trading Engine Server Service Provider. Alrighty. Now this is going to be a a public static class, so public static class, and you can read what a static class does. Pretty much a static class will be instantiated at the beginning of the program, or wherever it's called, or whenever the program determines that it needs to actually be created. So it's really not deterministic whether this is created when the program starts or whether a method in this actual class is called, but you can read more about that simply online. So what we're going to have here is a public static method called iService that will return an iService provider. So we are going to have this iService provider accessible to us throughout the entire application in case we need it somewhere, because this class is static and because this member variable is static. We're going to call it service provider. We're going to have a getter and a setter for it. Now, where are we going to set this, guys? Well, we're going to set it after building this host. So we're going to say trading engine service provider dot service provider equals engine dot services. Guys, this object, this engine, is now an iHost. It is no longer of type trading engine server. We've registered trading engine server as a service we'd like to host, the main application that we'd like hosted in this host. And therefore, when we call build trading engine server, we're not getting back our server. We're getting back an object of type iHost, and that has this iService provider attached to it. So we're going to store this iService provider, which is a collection of all the services that we registered right over here, in this public, globally accessible class, globally accessible static class called trading engine server service provider. Now what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to create some scope in case later down the road we're going to be adding scoped services to this trading engine. You can read more about what a scope is. I will link documentation below. Damn, I need to write all this documentation that I want to link to you guys. Task, static class, options. And I'm also going to add, what did I just mention? Scope. So creating scope, which will include what the difference between a singleton object or a scoped object or a transient object is. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do something like using var scope equals trading engine service provider services dot create scope. You can read more about what this is doing online. It creates a scope in which scoped services will exist for us. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run our actual engine. So I will say await, and this is obviously asynchronous programming, so I will also link a link to what asynchronous programming is in the description box below. Async programming, there's so many links. I'm going to pick 2 or 3 for you guys in case you're interested in really diving into this if you're not familiar with C#. So engine.run async. Now I can pass in some sort of token, but it takes in a default cancellation token. I'm going to also link to what a cancellation token is. In general, a cancellation token will allow you to cancel a task. It will allow you to cancel a long-running task that might be done by the main thread, a background thread. That's not important. C# is going to take care of that for us. We don't need to care about threads when we're talking about async and await and tasks. So we're going to run it async, whether or not that's done by the main thread or some other worker thread. That's not up for us to decide. That's up for C# to decide, right? So now we're going to call configure await, because we don't care about returning after this awaited call on the original context that we called this run async with. And I'll probably include a link on what the heck configure await is. If I took time to explain every single one of these things, this would be like a 4-hour video. So part of this series, guys, is going to be reliant on you to understand what some of this is, and I will include all the resources you need to learn about it at the beginning. And the earlier you learn about this stuff, the more clear it will be when I start using more of these concepts later down the road. Now, I don't suspect that I'm ever going to need to actually create a service that is scoped. I don't think I'll ever need to create that for this actual series, but I'm simply adding this here to create it just for the sake of fullness. If I ever do decide to go in here and say, for example, services.add scoped, a scoped service, right? So if I ever want to add, like, let's say trading engine server, for whatever reason, this is a scoped service and it's not a singleton service, now I added a scoped service and I created a scope for the scoped service. Okay, but we're not going to be adding any scoped services. At least I don't think we are currently. Alrighty guys, well we really have everything we need to run our trading engine server. This trading engine server is going to run, but it won't actually do anything. Alright, it's not going to do anything because we didn't ask it to do anything in the execute async method of this trading engine server. But what I do want to show you guys as we wrap up this video is what's actually going on here. So when I'm calling RunAsync and when I'm building this host, what's going on here? So where exactly is trading engine server being created? Because obviously here we don't see anything trading engine server, right? This is iHost. This is of type, iService provider. This is of type iService scope. This is of type iHost. So where the hell is the trading engine server being created? So let's go ahead and click here. We're going to put a breakpoint here. All right, you're going to see how this is being created. Now I'm actually, before we actually take a look at that, I'm just going to call logger here. So we're going to say iLogger, log information. We're going to pass the message to here. So starting, we're going to say name of trading engine server. And we're also going to say at the end here, stopped. So we're going to say started. Right, so this while loop is going to run just like any game loop might run, and then once we break out of this loop, because we are done running this application, it's terminated, we've closed it, then we are going to get this, stop this application. Alrighty, now let's actually give it a run. And what you're going to see is, beforehand, let me just talk what you're going to see. This configuration object will have an instance of trading engine server configuration, which will be filled out for us. So we didn't write any code to fill it out for us, okay? All that filling out, all that's happening because in our host builder here, we registered this section of the configuration, so this section of the app settings.json as this object. So we are registering this section as this object, and by calling .configure behind the scenes, it'll fill all that out for us, and it will create an instance of this trading server configuration for us as an instance of iOptions available to us anywhere we want to call iOptions in the constructor of an object. All right, so let's give it a go. Now, I'm going to run this. Hopefully there's no build errors here. Building. Alrighty, so I'm going to move this to the side a bit here. I'm going to bring it back when it's important. So as you can see here, we have an instance of iLogger. It's not null, so we're going to step through this with just F10. And let's check. Do we have a value? Yes, we do indeed have a value. What's in the value? Well, the value is our trading engine configuration, which has an object of type trading engine server settings, which has a port of 12,000. Amazing. Magic. All right, we didn't need to write any code to set the port or whatever. It took it directly from this file right here, and it simply dependency injected it by using iOptions here. So it is an optional item that we can dependency inject into any class that we want. And by it being optional, it doesn't actually have to have a value. It can be null, for example. Alrighty, let's just click continue. I'm going to bring this back right here. As you can see here, the iLogger call. So what happened was, as part of building this host and calling RunAsync on it, execute async was called, and therefore this line was called. As you can see, we have our little logging here, started trading engine server. Now I believe I can click Control-C and it should cancel this stopping token, meaning it will cancel the running of this server, and it should print stopped. I believe that's what will happen. I may be wrong. So if I do Control-C here, let's see what happens here. So yes, I did indeed click Control-C. Application is shutting down, and yes, application is shutting down will cancel this stopping token. So what will happen is stopping token dot cancel. Oh no, we can't call cancel on the token. We can call it on the cancellation source. So we will have something. So when this host is built, it'll pass in this cancellation token. Where's this cancellation token coming from? Well, it's coming from cancellation token source. So there's an object called cancellation token source. And what's actually going on is, I'm assuming that this hosting library is storing a reference to this cancellation token source somewhere. And when I do Control-C, it's calling token.cancel, cancellation token.dispose. And it's canceling the underlying token of this token cancellation source. Well, what is the underlying token? Well, it is cancellation token source dot token. And this dot token is what's being passed into my execute async method. So when I do control plus C, what's happening is while this while loop's running, a call to dot cancel on the cancellation token source is being called. That cancels the token. So this token is returning true for is cancellation requested, and this while loop is therefore ending. This while loop is ending, and this .log information is being called, and it writes to the console stopped trading engine server. As you can see here, we have that line right here, stopped trading engine server. Alrighty, guys. So we have built our trading server as a background service using Microsoft's hosting library. We have logging working already. We are dependency injecting this configuration into the actual trading engine server as an optional, and everything is fine and dandy. We're going to stop here, guys. I believe I'm half an hour in or more. Hopefully you've enjoyed this introduction. You've enjoyed kind of me running through what you can expect with this series. If you have any questions, guys, make sure to leave it in the comment section below. And guys, it's 1 a.m. here, so please give me a like and subscribe if you have enjoyed this content. I do enjoy making this for you guys, and I'm excited to see where this develops. I hope this will be a long-running series. We'll be building on this application. We'll be going back and forth maybe in the comment section. We'll be building a really robust application that's architected extremely nicely and is written extremely cleanly. If you guys want to support this channel, I have a Patreon link in the description box below. You can also become a channel member by clicking join. You should see it right below the video. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to share it far and wide. Cheers.